Hello, this is Bilal Jarwan from Amman, Jordan. I'm working as a senior software development engineer in test. Today we will talk about how you can automate the HTML tables, how you can deal with the different sizes of the HTML tables in the automation, how you can get the data from the tables, and how you can assert the data that you are expecting to get from the tables, even if it's in a small sizes or in the big sizes. Okay, first of all, let's know and talk about what is the HTML tables. HTML tables, it's arrangement of information or data, typically in rows and columns, and maybe sometimes it will be in a more complex structure. The tables are widely used in communication, research, and data analysis. In the HTML tables, we have three components. The first one is the rows, the second one is the headers, and the third one is the cells. And if we are talking about the rows, it's the main component in the HTML tables because the headers and the cells will be inside the rows. So in every single row, you will see even header or cell. When you start automating the HTML tables, maybe you will face a lot of issues. And this coming because you are following the not a correct way to automate or not a best practice to automate. So for example, let's say we have this table and I want to get, for example, the size for the first one or the size for the third one. Some people going to this cell, right click on it, inspect, get the XPath, and go to check if the data is 5.6 or 7.1. But what if we have a new column added in the table? If you are following the same XPath that you add, you will get different data. Like in this example, we are getting the weight for the first one and the weight for the third one. So if you are following to just right click on the element and inspect, get the XPath and just assertion, if we have any changes on the column numbers or we had a new column between the columns, your XPath will get another data, not the exact data that you are looking for. The second problem that you will have, the same table, I need to get the same data, but I have added a new row in the top. So if I want to get the same XPath for the same element, I will get 5.1 instead of 5.6 and 6.1 instead of 7.1. And this is the most common problems that guys, when working in the automation testing for the HTML tables, fall in. Okay, so when you know the problems, you will set the logical question in your mind to solve it. So what is the logical question when you are working in the HTML tables? The logical questions coming like, I want to get the mobile when the operating system is equal Android. So I will print all of the mobiles or get all the mobiles with the operating system is Android. Another logical question, I want to get the size for the mobile who's have a weight 190 gram. So after you prepare your questions, logical questions, you can set a solution strategy. And the solution strategy will be like, I want to check the headers, and let's say I'm trying to get the operating system. So I will do like a for loop to check all the headers and know what is the index of the header that I need to get data for. So the needed data now is operating system. And I need to get the data for what? For the weight equal 150 gram. And this is the case. So visiting all the headers, check what is the needed header. And at this point, I know from which column I will get the data. And then I continue to get for which header I want to get the data. So in this case, we are getting for the weight when the weight is equal 150. So now we know the column, operating system, and we need to know the row, and the row will be coming from this next column. So now we will go to the same row and getting the data from the column that we saved in the beginning for the operating system. Now, after we are talking about what is the tables, what is the problems that you have when you automate the HTML tables, and you are setting some of logical questions, solution strategy, we can say let's code it. Before that, let me show you some of the examples that we have. We have this table, the same table that we showed in the presentation, and we have another table with a lot of data, like 100 rows. And we will see if we write the same code, it will work for both or not. So if you follow the same strategy with the logical equations that you set, you will solve your problem. Okay, so if we back to the solution strategy, we are talking about the header. So we will visit all the headers, and then we will check what is the needed header exactly, the index of the needed header, to check the column that we need to get data from. And the second thing will be, we need to check for which header that we need get the data. Now we can go to IntelliJ. Okay, first of all, I will initialize a driver. It's a web driver, and the type of the web driver will be Chrome. So I can say web driver, driver. And before each method, I will say driver equal new Chrome driver. And then I will say driver dot manage dot window dot maximize, and then driver dot get. Okay, I will not visit a URL. I will not visit a website. So I have an HTML files in my project. I have two. One's called big data HTML, and the second one table.html. So let's start with this one, the table. We'll say system.getProperty user.dir plus table.html, just to optimize the code and rearrange the code. Okay, now in before method, just we are initializing the driver and visiting the HTML table that we need to work on. And after the method, just we will say driver.quit. Okay, now we will create our test here. We will say test public void get data from table. Okay, so first of all, you need to get a list of rows, all the rows that you have in your table. So how you can get it? You will say, first of all, it's a list because you have most one row. So you say list, and the type will be web element, and it will be called rows. Just we need to import the class java.util. Okay, so how can I get the rows from the table directly? I will say driver.findElement by.id. Okay, what is the ID of this table? I will just inspect and get the ID is table. So I will say table. Using this statement, I'm getting the table only. Now I need to get the rows only. So I will say, after you are getting the table, I need to fetch all the rows that I have in this table. So I will say find elements by dot. How can I get the rows? If you remember in the HTML here, you will see the rows, it's tr. So how can I get it? I will say by dot tag name tr. So I will say by dot tag name tr. So now in this statement, we can say, yes, we are getting all the rows in the table. And then we will visit row by row to check the headers and the cells. How we can do that? We will do a for loop starting from 0 and the end in the rows dot size, and then we need to increment the I. Now we need to initialize the headers and the cells. Every single header, it's belong to the rows, and the same for the cells. So I will initialize a new list with web elements, and sure, it will be called headers. And how can I get the headers from each row and to check if this row have a header or not? I will say rows.get index. So I'm getting row by row, and then I need to find elements by a new tag name, and that's called th. In this statement, I'm listing all the headers that I have in each row if I have. And next statement will be the same, list web element, and will be cells equal rows dot get I dot find elements by dot tag name, and the tag name for the cells will be td. So now we have a list of headers, list of cells. Now if you remember the solution strategy, we need to visit the headers only. So what we need to do, we need to do another for loop, and this for loop will be just visiting the headers that we have to check on which header that we need to get data for and which header that we need to get data from. So we will say for integer j equals 0, j less than headers dot size and j plus plus. And then we need to set the semicolon before after 0. Okay, now I need to initialize two very important variables: which header that I need to get data for, which header that I get data from. And this will be integer because I need to get the exact position for these headers. So I will initialize these variables in the beginning of method. I will say integer needed header index and equal 0. And then I will say integer header index and equal 0. The needed header, the header that we need to get data from, and the header index, that the header that we need to get data for. So what we need to do, for example, we will ask if headers.getj.getText.equal, and let's say in this example we need to get the data. For example, I need to get operating system, or let's say the weight for mobile Galaxy A5. So I will say I need to get the data for the weight, and then I will see needed header index will be j. Okay, another if statement, because I need to get data from. For what? I will say headers.getj.getText.equal. I need to get data from the mobile. So I will say header index equal j. Okay, let's rearrange the code. Okay, so in this for loop, just we are visiting all the headers and saving the index for the needed header and for the header that we need to get data for. Now I will create an if statement, and this if statement will be two parts. The first one, to check if the cells in this row it's not equal 0, because if you are requesting any cell and this cell is really equal 0, it will not work, because the size of the cells is very important at this moment. So I will say if cells dot size not equal 0 and cells dot get. What I want to get at this moment, I want to check if the header is equal the data that I expect. So in our example, I need to check if the index of the cell of header index is .getText.equal the data that I need. So I need to get the weight for Galaxy A5. If this one is correct, so what is the weight? 180 gram. So I will do assertion. My assertion will be like assert equal and cells dot get needed header index dot get text, and the second part will be 180 gram. Okay, so let's back to our code and let's debug it from scratch. First of all, we are doing for loop to visit all the headers and to make sure what is the needed header that I need to get data from, and what is the exact header that I need to get data for. In our example, I need to get the weight for the mobile Galaxy A5. So in the first for loop, I just set the index of the header of the column that I need to get data from, and then the column of the data that I need to get for. And once I get the mobile, which column, I will visit all the rows in the same column just to check which one, which mobile, which weight, so sorry, which mobile, and the mobile will be Galaxy A5, and we need to check if the mobile Galaxy A5 in the same row we will print the weight, or we will check if the weight is equal 180 gram. So now we will run the code. It's okay. Okay, it works. So let's say now we need to do another thing, like how we can make sure if the assertion is working fine or not. Let's change the value from 180 to another thing like 190. So I will say 190 and run it. The expectation is to be 180, not 190, but I change it to make it sure it works or not. So if you see the console now, it will tell you, yeah, expected 190, but we found 180, and this is the real data that we need. Okay, what if we're thinking about data more than this data? Like in this example, we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows. And in this example, we have a lot of data. By using this table, just you need to check specific data. So let's take one of the examples. Okay. I will get the name for the person who start date 2008 11/28. Okay? So, first of all, we need to access the big data table. In this case, we are accessing the table.html. And if we need to access the big data, just we will copy the name and replace it there. And now we will change only what we need. We need the name for start date, and when start date is equal this one. What is the expected data for this start date? It will be this name, right? Okay, let's put it. Okay, to make sure that we have the same ID, inspect to make sure is the ID is example, it's not table, so we will change it to be example, just to make sure. Again, Chrome, right click, and yes, is example. So just we are changing the ID of the table, and we are following the same thing but changing the headers that we are searching for. Now we will run the code and see. It works. Let's try change the name. So we are expecting this name. Let's change it to this one. And run it again. It will fail. Why? Because we are expecting to see the old name that we set, and this is the name that we are setting now. So our code will work on a different tables, even if the table is small, even if the table is big, even if you need to, like, you have a text field in the table, drop down list, radio button, and checkbox, and so on. Just you need to change the functionality that you use. So let's say we have an example, but it's not in this table. Let's say you need not to assert there. I need to, for example, to fill the name. When the start date is 2008, I will fill the name with Dimitri, for example. So I can say not get text or not assertion at all. So I just need to get this cell dot get the index of the cell and change the strategy. Not get text, send key. So I need to fill it. For the drop-down list will be a different idea. By declaring a drop-down list, depends on the area that you are working on or the cell that you are working on, and then to select a specific data from this cell. So in this way, you are happy to deal with the HTML tables with the different sizes and the different data, and you can see it's like a block of code. So it's really like a piece of cake. It's not so hard. Just you need to set your solution strategy, starting from the headers, set what is the column that you need to get data from, and what the column that you need to get data for. When you get the column that you need to get data for, just you need to check what is the value of the row. And once you are getting the row, just you will back to the first column and get the data from. at the same row. Okay, now you can now scan the code, and you can get the repo that we have in the GitHub, and you can download it in your machine and so on. So we will have some updates on it, and you can practice some tasks on it if you want. And if you have any questions regarding to the tables, how you can fill it, how you can get the data from, you can also ask me, even in the workshop or after the workshop, for sure. And let's start in the let's talk about what we learned in this session. We learned, first of all, how to avoid the possible automation problem when we are working in the HTML tables. The second thing, how we can set the solution strategy for the HTML tables and how we can automate it. And the third thing, less code, more coverage. So you are writing like block of code and you are covered a lot of things. So you can make it parameterized. For example, if you are working in the test-ng framework, you can have something like the parameter, and you can pass the headers, and you can pass the value that you need, and then you can work on a lot of tables with the same lines of code. Now, if you have any questions.
Oh, for sure. Let me start. This is not a question from me, but from my colleague, but he's so shy that I have to spell it by myself.
Yeah.
So the idea is, if you have a table, basically we can read the whole table into the two-dimensional array, store the indexes of the headers, and use it like two-dimensional array. So at a glance, it looks like a simpler solution. What you can tell about it, and why do you think that your solution is more efficient or just more useful?
Okay. If we are trying to solve the problem using two-dimensional array, and we need to fill the data in, what is the difference between this solution and the solution that we are doing now? One, we are doing with less code. There is no need to transfer the data to the array, and then I need to search for the array, and then I need to check, and this will take a long time from your side to make a code. This is the first thing. The second thing, we are talking about the structure of the table. So the structure of the table is for three components: rows, headers, cells. So if you are working in this way, you will make the things better and easier for you. You are not just migrating the data from the HTML to the array, and if you are migrating the data from the HTML to the array, that you need to set a specific data. So this is the cells, this is the headers, and this is the rows, and this will be very risky for you. So the better way to separate the things, to divide your components, depends on the area that you are working on, like the HTML table, and you can start from the rows, then headers and cells. So this is the best solution to deal with the HTML tables.
Thanks. Folks, I would like to remind you that we are on the workshop, so you cannot just ask some ideological questions, but you can ask Bilal to show you some other examples. Maybe you want to see some, I don't know, some magic idea or some other implementation.
Yes, sure.
Margarita, I know that you definitely have some questions.
No.
She's not.
Okay. Bilal, so please, let's open, please, the big table.
Yes, this one.
And, okay, so can we modify your algorithm so that we will find the average age of all persons who work in New York? Will it be hard or will it be simple?
Yeah.
Show us, please.
Okay. So the question is, just we need to get the average of the ages
for the whole people who work in New York.
In New York only. So just we need to visit first of all, we need to get the age. So the needed header is age, and we need to get the data from which one? From the office, and the office should be equal New York. So what we need to do, we will change two things. The first thing, we will say I want the age, okay, and for office, and when the office is equal, where's in New York, this one, okay. Now we don't need the assertion. We will initialize a variable. I will say integer, for example, as sum, okay, and count, integer count equal 0. And now I will say sum equal sum plus the value of this cell. So we'll say cells.get needed header index .get text, but we need to cast it. So how we can do that? We will say integer dot integer dot parse int, and we need to parse this text. Okay, so now just let's set initialize value. Yes, is it? And now after setting the sum and outside of the all for loops, we will do our printing for the count, or not average, I will name it average. Yeah, count plus plus, and then we will say south sum or count. I think it should be outside this one and outside of this one. I think there. Okay, that's better. Let's run it. Ah, it's failed. Why is it? Yeah, okay, it's count, it's not increased. I think that age, okay, for office New York, okay, we should visit this one. Okay, yes, just outside the for loop of rows. I think that's here, that will be better. Yeah, so now we are printing the average is 48. So if we are checking the, I don't think so we will visit all these ages, 100 row. So we can change the value, for example, let's say London. But to make it clear, why was failed? Because we are printing after the if statement inside the rows. So after visiting the first row, we are trying to print the average, and it will not work for sure. So that's why we are setting it out of the rows for loop. Run it again.
Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the solution is quite okay, but are you like using the solution exactly the same way, or you have the framework which is designed better? I mean, to have, for example, table utils which will take the row and then the column, and you will give like name, and then it will return the exact value from the table.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree with you. When you have a structure for your framework, so you can mix some like different or separate methods inside one class to handle the rows, separate rows and the cells and the headers, and you can just send the row, or for each row you can send it to the cells to handle it, and for the headers as well. Yeah.
That could be very, very good.
Yeah, for sure.
Of the facade that you can create based on the one table and then work with the table.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Folks, any other questions?
Any other questions?
If not, Bilal, I guess it's time to choose the best question. Actually, there was two from my colleague and from Sergis.
Okay, so because we have just two questions and we have two vouchers, so I will give the guys two vouchers. That will be very good. So come.